Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K17. My name is Pete and today we complete the first year of MyGM or MyLeague mode in NBA 2K17 with the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves might just be the most promising team in the league. 3 of their 4 best players are barely in their 20s and there are no glaring holes on the roster. Despite a lot of talent already on board, the Timberwolves still have a lot of cap space to acquire more players, but let's begin things with what they already have and take a closer look at their lineup. At the point guard, the Wolves start with Ricky Rubio, who is the clear go-to option here and under contract for the next 3 years. Behind him, both Tyus Jones and Chris Dunn can make the case for the backup. Chris Dunn's rookie season was a bit disappointing, but he still has an 80 potential rating, so all hope is not lost. Tyus Jones, on the other hand, is only 20 years old, so the future is definitely bright for him. Zach LaVine is then the only true shooting guard on the team, and he is capable of playing heavy minutes, but you also have a bunch of players at the small forward who could step in behind him. One of those players might be Shabazz Muhammad, who is more of a slasher, and if your trust in him is high enough, then he could also end up being your only backup for both the shooting guard and the small forward position. That is largely due to the fact that you already have another bona fide star at the small forward in Andrew Wiggins, and a 3-man rotation with Wiggins, LaVine and Muhammad is definitely possible. If you want your bench to be a bit more represented, then you can choose between Omri Caspi and Brandon Rush as the 4th man in that rotation. Both of them don't really shine in anything, but generally speaking, Rush is the better shooter, while Caspi's skills and size make him more suitable for an inside approach. On paper, the power forward is the weakest position on the team. Nemanja Bjelica is your best player here with a 73 overall, backed up by the not much worse Adrian Payne. Now, what might seem as a problem at the power forward gets quickly solved if we have a look at the army of centers. 5 players in total occupy the center spot, and with that much manpower, I'm sure you'll figure out a rotation for both the power forward and the center spot. My personal recommendation would be, of course, to start Karl Anthony Towns at either one of those 2 spots. He works just as well as the power forward as he does at the center, and he can be paired up with either Dieng, Pekovic, Aldridge or the aforementioned Bjelica. And while Jordan Hill is not significantly worse than Aldridge or Bjelica, you simply have the luxury of not having to give him playing time, something that I would make use of. To get a bit more in detail about the centers, let me just quickly mention that the ratings of Dieng, Towns, Aldridge, Pekovic and Hill all increase if they are switched to power forward. So what I would do is I'd switch Dieng to power forward, make him a 77 overall starter, and then pick Bjelica and Pekovic and maybe also Cole Aldridge as the backups for the power forward and center spots. But I'm sure you'll be able to figure out a rotation that suits you as the season goes along. Let's have a look at the expiring contracts next, and the situation is fairly manageable here. Only 3 players expire straight up. Shabazz Muhammad is the most important one in the group, but keep in mind that all 3 are small forwards, so you should keep an eye on your rotation here. Next to that, we have 5 team options to take care of. Those are on Wiggins, Towns, LaVine, Payne and Jones, and it should be somewhat obvious that at least the first 3 are pretty much no-brainers. Then your cap space situation is already very solid, with over $20 million still free going into the season. Next year that amount will be at over $34 million, however not factoring in the team options. If you take them all, then you still have about $12.5 million left to spend in free agency, but keep in mind that the contracts for Wiggins and LaVine expire after that season, so you might want to keep a bit of spare change. And as usual, last but not least, draft picks, and as a team that has built through the draft, picks are of course important in Minnesota. They still have their first rounder for 2017, and even though the 2018 first rounder is not listed here, that one only goes to Atlanta if it falls outside of the lottery. If it does not, the Timberwolves then keep the pick and instead send the 2019 first rounder over to the Hawks. That is also why that pick is marked as a protection backup. In 2020, the Wolves then have all of the picks, but by then the team should hopefully no longer be in a position where they need to build with rookies. With the situation now somewhat lined out, let's go a bit more in detail about the strategy, and to get things started, here are 3 key questions that need to be answered going into year 1 with the Timberwolves. Question number 1, how many of your centers do you really need? You start with 5, and even if you change Dieng to power forward, you still have 4 left, alongside then 3 power forwards. If Aldridge makes the rotation, that should leave both Payne and Hill without much to do, and even if you choose a different rotation, chances are high that two of your big men won't see playing time and clog up the roster. And that spot might just be better used for a backup shooting guard, for example. Question number 2. Are you aware of the number of absolutely massive paydays coming along your way? Now, technically, this is nothing that is extremely relevant in your first year with the Timberwolves, but it is important nonetheless. Your cap space situation is more than comfortable right now, but that is largely due to the fact that Towns, Wiggins and LaVine are all still on their rookie deals. Wiggins and LaVine will hit the free market in 2018, Towns a year later, and all of them will get paid one way or another. Be prepared to offer them max contracts because I can guarantee you somebody else will. You will of course have all of their bird rights and they will become restricted free agents, but I would not unnecessarily sign high-value free agents before the three of them are locked down. Keep in mind that Ricky Rubio will also be up for a new contract the same year that Towns gets one. And question number 3, do you keep or move Nikola Pekovic? For a 74 overall player, Pekovic does have a sizable contract. That alone is not a huge problem, his contract ends before you need to spend big time on Wiggins and LaVine, but you still might think that you can get someone better for your money. The 77 overall Jared Sullinger, for example, can be brought in for much cheaper from the free agency market, and there are a few other centers available either in trades or in the offseason that are better in terms of bang for your buck. With those 3 questions out of the way, one last thing before we get into the moves, and that would be our no trade list. I think it goes without saying that Towns, Wiggins, Rubio and LaVine are an extremely talented and, at least for now, an extremely cheap core that you don't want to trade. Muhammad and Dieng are a tier below that, and while you can make a strong argument against Dieng's huge contract extension, for now he is worth keeping around. And with that, I think we have laid the foundation. Let's get into it. Here are your 3 moves to make in NBA 2K17's MyGM or MyLeague mode in year 1 with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Move number 1. Trade either Adrian Payne or Jordan Hill. Both of them will likely be at the far end of the rotation, or even more likely not get playing time at all. Hill gets $8 million over the next 2 years, Payne is up for a $3 million option, and if they're just sitting on the bench without much to do, we can spend that money elsewhere. Because of his contract size and his age, my preference here would be Hill, but if you can't find something good for him, then Payne is fine as well. Trade targets for Hill are somewhat limited, and you will likely end up just getting his contract off the books without much value in return. One such trade would be this one for Udonis Haslem, who would get paid the same amount of money for basically the same job. The only difference being that he expires after the season and you have $4 million more available next free agency. Other comparable trades would be these for Metta World Peace or Troy Williams. World Peace could be immediately released and you could go shopping on the free agency market with the roster spot you freed up. Williams, on the other hand, is very young at 21 years old and might just fit in with the rising stars in Minnesota. For Payne, we can get pretty much the exact same deals. There are a few more teams willing to offer something for him. That might be because he's 4 years younger than Hill. In the end, I went with Hill for World Peace, but immediately released World Peace again, and instead signed Rodney Stuckey to a 1-year minimum deal with a cheap option for year 2. He can now work as a backup shooting guard behind LaVine, making both Omri Caspi and Brandon Rush more or less obsolete. If you did the same move, you can now choose whether or not you want to trade any of the two, but since they are both expiring next year, you might as well keep them. By the way, if you're asking yourselves why I did not release Hill straight up, that way we would still have to pay his salary for the entire duration of his contract, so we're effectively gaining nothing but a roster spot. Move number 2. If possible, sign Shabazz Muhammad to an extension. Waiting until free agency does nothing for you other than making the contract more expensive, so if he's willing to sign an extension, Muhammad should be locked down during the regular season. I found that he likes to test free agency, but that might be different for you. I would recommend either a true long-term deal if he's not asking for too much, or a shorter 2-year deal, maybe with a team option. The upside on that 2-year deal would be the fact that it expires just when you need to pay Towns, so any money not already committed might be a relief at that point. If you can't re-sign him here, then don't worry, he will become a restricted free agent, so you can always extend a qualifying offer and bring him back that way. And move number 3, the offseason. Between barely making the playoffs and finishing dead last in the Western Conference, basically everything is possible with the Timberwolves. No matter how your season goes, you likely won't win a championship, so two things are of primary interest for you now in the offseason. The first one is the draft. The worse you play in the season, the higher your chances are at getting the #1 pick. Realistically, you'll pick somewhere in the top 10, but most likely high enough to get you another promising piece. I would personally target another big man because you are a bit short on quality there, or if none are available, a backup shooting guard. If the pick falls too low for your taste, then consider either trading up or flipping it for a pick next year. And your second point of interest are the options. Don't make any mistakes here and pick up the options on Town, Wiggins and Levine. If you did not draft a star point guard, then I would definitely also bring back Jones. He is simply too good for his age to not be picked up here. With Payne, if you still have him, the choice is yours, but I would recommend not picking up his option and instead looking at the wide array of power forwards available in free agency. If you followed my moves and also signed Stuckey, then he can be brought back for one more year, even if you drafted another shooting guard. If you feel confident enough in the depth of your rotation, you're of course also free to let him walk. And that's it. You can now extend your qualifying offer to Shabazz Muhammad, that is if you were unable to re-sign him during the season, and you should still have somewhere between $12 to $17 million available in cap space. If you can find a player that fits in with the team without ruining your cap space for the foreseeable future, then feel free to spend some money in free agency now. To sum things up, all in all, the Timberwolves are already in an extremely good spot. They barely have any bad contracts, there are no glaring holes in the rotation, the team is young but already very talented, and cap space generally is not an issue. I highly recommend the team for beginners in MyGM or MyLeague mode. The Wolves give you a bit of everything without really putting any major obstacles in your way. If you're interested in taking over a well-managed franchise on the rise, then the Timberwolves are definitely a great choice. As usual, I'd be more than interested to hear how you would handle the Timberwolves in MyGM or MyLeague mode, so leave a comment below with suggestions, questions or critique. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button, and of course if you want to support the channel, then feel free to subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!